Welcome to the Simply Authentic podcast, where we hope to embolden you with discipline, personal growth, and abundance to live your most authentic life. Welcome back to the Simply Authentic podcast. I'm Tanya Murfin.
And I'm Angie Mullings. And today we are going to give you guys our fourth pillar of peak performance. You know, Tanya, we have talked in the past. We had 3 before this, obviously, since this is 4. Correct. I like to point out the obvious.
Thank you. Thank you, Angie.
So the first one was customer experience. And then the second one was time management.
Yes.
The third one was communication. And that was so involved that we took up 2 episodes on that. And then we took a little break over the summer. We had some really timely things we needed to talk to you all about. So we took a little break with our pillars, and now we're back with our fourth one, and it is ethics and integrity.
Yes.
The best leaders have the highest degree of ethics and integrity, and it's evident in the way they lead and do business. So it's not just about what we say, it's about how we act, how we treat others, and how we lead.
And I will point out the obvious that many times, someone might claim to be something or someone, and their actions speak louder than words.
Right.
And especially on something like social media.
Exactly.
Their actions could possibly say something completely different than who they present in person. Or maybe you and I are a good example. If we were owners and leaders in our company brokering these agents, and we said one thing and did another, well, we'd get called on that pretty quickly. So because we are in the business we are, and we're trying to teach and lead agents in the right direction to do the right thing every time, then we have to practice what we preach.
Right.
And we have to show them by example of exactly how you handle that situation, and you do the right thing every time.
Right. Every time. You know, Tanya, I think right now would be a good time for me to interject so that our listeners can kind of think about this as we're talking through these things. We both listened to an Ed Milet podcast just very recently. And he said, if someone were watching the reel of your life without sound, they couldn't hear what you were saying, would they be able to tell that you were someone of integrity? So I want you to think about that as we're going through some of our examples and really digging into this ethics and integrity concept. And would someone be able to tell just by watching the reel of your life who you were and that you were a person of integrity?
And I want to make a disclaimer on my own behalf, and I'm sure I can include this for you. We were raised a certain way. And I think you and I, we think alike, we react a lot alike in many ways, but we're not perfect.
Right.
We've not lived a perfect life.
Right.
I've made mistakes.
What?
I don't know that you have, but now's your time to admit it.
Okay.
But we're going deeper than that, right?
Yeah.
We're not claiming that we are, self-righteous and walk the same shoes that Jesus walks in. We're not claiming that.
Right.
We're just saying that we want you to think about and maybe pose the question to yourself, if someone were watching your reel at the end of your life, would it stand for integrity? What will people say about you? Right? When your life is over, what is your legacy?
Right.
And are you going to be proud of it, or are you going to be ashamed of it?
And when we talk about leaders and performance, I think that's something that all leaders, if you are a leader of integrity, you are thinking about, what is my legacy? What am I leaving behind? Because the hope is all great leaders, if you are doing the things correctly, you are leaving a legacy and you're concerned about that legacy. So making sure that it's something that you can be proud of, that the people behind you can go further with, to take it a step further. That's what we want as good leaders, great leaders. That's what we need to be focused on.
Certainly.
Tanya, we are we're coming up on elections, and it is unfortunate that we have a lack of good leaders to pattern ourselves after. So we don't have a lot of great role models. And I'll mention the book that I have open here. It's John Maxwell's latest book. It's High Road Leadership. And I really encourage you to read it if you are interested in becoming a better leader, if you're in a leadership position. He has a lot of great points in here, but he says in the book that we are lacking good leaders. And a lot of that has to do with, rather than if you tell me why I should vote for you, and you give me examples of your leadership, of what your platform is, if I can respect you, even if I don't agree with everything you say, I'm more likely, this is just me, I'm more likely to vote for you because you haven't spewed negativism about your opponent, because
Agreed.
there's nothing that turns me off worse than that. There is a quote in John Maxwell's book that says more than 75% of Americans believe morals are getting worse. They cite the greatest problem as a lack of consideration for others.
And I think the closer you get to election time, the worse the ads get.
Yeah.
And it's like spewing venom, in my opinion. You turn the TV on, and all it is ads, and so-and-so did this, and so-and-so acts like this, and believes in this, and da-da-da-da-da. I agree with you. If they would just state what their platform is, I could make a better decision, because the uglier
Absolutely.
the ads get, I'm not voting for that person.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
I don't care what they stand for.
Yeah.
They made an ugly ad. It's terrible. So I do think our country is really questioning morals and integrity in almost everything we see, every person we meet. And it's, I don't know, are we less trusting than we used to be, or are our eyes more wide open? Right?
Yeah. I think that we, unfortunately, we're all afraid to say something. We're all afraid to offend. We're too afraid, when really what we need is good discourse. We need people. I'm going to go back to the book again, because it's got so many great nuggets. But he talks about Abraham Lincoln in the book, and he talks about how Lincoln surrounded himself with his opponents, the people who ran against him, because he said, if I set myself in a room and everybody has the same thoughts, if we're all alike, and there's no differences, then how can we be better as a country? Because I need the dissidents in the room. I need people who will give me a different point of view. And we wanted that in the boardroom. I didn't want to sit at the head of the table and have everyone around the table agree, because that made me feel empty. It made me feel like we weren't moving the needle, because we didn't have differences of opinion. And that's what makes our country great. Honestly, Tanya, we deserve more. We deserve better. As if we're going to tout that we're the number one, we're the greatest country, we're not living up to it right now.
Agree.
Because we don't, we deserve more, and we're not demanding more. And really, I think that's what we need to. And if we bring that back, we've been kind of just putting this talking about this big umbrella of politics in general, but that goes for leaders at every level, right?
Sure,
we really want people. I want to be able to trust someone who is in a leadership position. I want to be able to state my opinion without being ridiculed for it or admonished because of it. Because if we're really trying to be better, and you and I being better for our clients, for our listeners, we need the naysayers. We need to say, but what if? We need people to say, but what if? Or have you thought about this? And I can take that and I can run with that.
Well, and just to be clear, just because you have opposing beliefs, or you have a disagreement, or the person in the room that sits beside you is always the person to give the what if side, that doesn't compromise their integrity.
Not at all.
It just helps you come to a solution, seeing all sides of the cube, if you will.
Right. You and I have talked about how when we were on the board, and we might walk into that boardroom with one set of ideas. Like we kind of felt like how we knew how we were going to vote. We had a thought in our head about how we were going to vote or what our thoughts were on a certain topic. But then if somebody else in the room had a different thought, we're both open and minded enough that I don't think I'm always right. I know I'm not always right.
I know I'm not.
And I'm going to walk in the room and be open to other suggestion. And to me, that's part of integrity and ethics, because I'm going to be open to other discussion. I'm going to be respectful of someone else's opinion and listen. And I might learn something if I listen.
Agree. So let me define integrity.
Yep.
It's the quality of being honest, having strong moral principles, and behaving ethically, even when no one is watching. So I was digging deep last night in my memory bank, and sometimes that can take a while, Angie. But I came up with a memory of my grandmother and I. Her name was Mama, that's what we called her, and it was my mom's mom. And my mom and I had a disagreement. And at the time, we were living with my grandmother and grandpa. And so my mom and I got in this big fight, and I was crying, and I had stormed out the garage door, which had a door to the exterior. And so I was sitting out there in the dark on this pad of concrete by myself. And pouting, crying, thinking of how much I disliked my mother in that moment. And I'm sure she was right. Whatever it was about, I'm certain my mom was probably right. But my sweet little grandma comes out there and says, Tanya Lynn, because that's what she called me, Tanya Lynn, come on now, you can't be crying. You and your mom have got to get along. And she was just the world's biggest cheerleader for everybody.
Yeah.
And this is when I was a teenager, and she said to me something very encouraging. And I said, my response was, well, can't you just lie for me and tell her this? And I said the word lie. And she looked at me with her sweet little face and said, oh, Tanya Lynn, I can't lie. I can't lie for you, and I can't lie for your mom. And that moment stands out to me because that's who my grandma was to her core. And my grandpa as well. And they both taught that. They lived it. And we saw it in everything they did and said. They had integrity. And I know that you were raised similarly. We can reflect together on our families, and our families don't even know each other. But we probably had a very similar raising, that we were taught you do the right thing every time. And you don't lie. And to get people to trust you, you have to tell the truth.
That's right.
Even if it's painful. Right?
Yeah.
So can you think of a memory of your own?
Well, I mean, just in general, you're right. I think we were both raised, fortunately for both of us, we both had really good role models. And that's
Very
what I
good.
think some of, I don't know if your kids can say that they've got, personally, they've got great role models, but if outside of your family or outside of your friend group or whatever, can they say they've got really good, they've had really great role models to look up to in the public eye? Could they really say that? I could say that there were people in the public eye when I was growing up, and also within my family, that we just it was a different time. We just had better role models, and we could people we could look up to and know that they were the right example for us. So I know that I could probably tell 100 stories, about just different examples of watching that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have grown up the way I had. I wouldn't be the person I am had I not had that to witness and be a part of. I go back to a story when I was brand new, because let's face it, all of us have been that. I think we'd be hard pressed to find someone who has not had something similar happen to them, and that someone asked them to do the wrong thing.
Yes.
And they had to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to do that. Or and cut that person out of their life or do whatever
Or
needed to
turn
be
down the
done
business.
or turn down the business,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
exactly sort of, well, the way my story went. But I was young when I got into this business, and I was hungry. I didn't have another source of income, so I needed that paycheck. I needed every paycheck I could get, and I vividly remember now that I had a client that I had his listing, and we had just gone through the inspection process, and he'd filled out disclosures but hadn't asked me about anything on the disclosure. I'd read them over. I remember looking at them, and there was really nothing to question. And then on the inspection, they found mold in the house, and it was intimated to me that the seller probably had known about that because this mold had been there for a long time. It was probably from a previous leak or something.
Got it.
So when the inspection report came in and we were asked to fix the problem, I said, they're intimating that you knew this. And he said, oh yeah, I knew that. We fixed it. It was a water heater leak. We fixed that. We came back. It busted. The water heater busted when we were on vacation. So it ran for a few days. And we came back and we replaced the water heater.
Didn't remediate the mold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I said, I was immediately taken aback that he had blatantly lied on his disclosure, because he didn't even check that the water heater, I think it did say the water heater had been replaced, but he didn't say why.
Due to a leak.
Or that led to mold. And, so I said, I have a responsibility. Our ethics require us, it says that we have to disclose anything of material defect that we know or should have known about a property. And I said, well, Mr. Seller, I now have to report that to, the buyer. I'm going to have to let people know that, that we knew that, or I'm going to have to tell them what I know. And he was awful. Called me every name in the book, called my broker, I walked away from that meeting crying because I needed that paycheck.
Yeah.
I needed that check.
Yeah.
But I wasn't going to, it could have cost me my license.
Sure,
And I
sure.
recognize that it could have cost me my license. So in the long run, it wasn't, it wasn't as costly to me as it could have been if I stayed the course and said, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. They can't prove that you don't know it and, whatever. But luckily, my broker backed me up, and we ended up that transaction never made it to fruition because we fired that client, and rightfully so. And so at least I had the backing. I had a broker who was ethical and had integrity, and he led that way, and he really supported us if we came to them and said, and obviously this was an obvious one, right? This
Sure,
was a
of
no-brainer. If one of your
course.
agents brought that to you, you would have done the same thing, and
That's
so
right.
would have I.
Yep.
But it was awful at the time just because I needed to eat.
Yeah.
And I had to do the right thing, and that really is to me, that's what makes or breaks you. If it was all about the paycheck, then I could have just swept that under the rug. But
And
it
hoped
wasn't.
it never got caught. Hoped you never got turned in.
Exactly.
And that the sale went through without any lawsuit behind it.
Right.
So let's talk about our business models that we set up, and we kind of set them up with accountability in mind, right?
Right.
And this is just you and I comparing business practices after we became friends. You set your business up way before I set mine up, but we wanted similar things for our brokerages, and that is a model where you don't take on every agent because number one, you don't have to or you don't want to.
Right.
And let's face it, with less agents in our brokerages, and we're more of a boutique size, both of us.
Yeah.
We have a little less liability because we don't have hundreds of agents. We have less than 50 around those margins. And so it just, I think for both of us, it was a business model that we felt comfortable with because You can have a little more control over trainings, what you teach, what the agents are doing, and it's more one-on-one. Let's be honest. It's more one-on-one. Our agents in our meetings have the opportunity to ask questions, give feedback. They feel comfortable with you to call you at night and ask you a question, or come in during the day and sit down with you and say, I've got this problem and I have a seller that wants to lie on their disclosure and I know better. What are my legal obligations? And my ethical obligations. So I want to mention that the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics was adopted in 1913.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
It was before.
This is not new.
No. And it was before attorneys. We were the first national organization to adopt a set of ethics. And and so we've been practicing this way since, over 100 years. So.
Exactly. And I want to add to that we have fair housing rules as well. That keep us from discriminating against people of various different backgrounds, cultures, nationality, origin, those sorts of things. So in our industry, we are held to a high standard by the rules and the laws that have been put in place for a way of practicing.
Yes.
Now, that doesn't mean that everybody practices that way.
No.
Right?
Right.
And with our recent changes, and we did a podcast a little bit ago, a few weeks back, about the changes in our real estate market and our contract language and our agency agreements and how we're practicing. And so this is top of mind for us right now.
Yeah, it really is. And I don't know that it's ever specifically happened to me, but I know I've heard other agents talk about it where, you talked about fair housing and back to integrity and our ethics. Our code of ethics requires that we not discriminate in any way. I have heard other agents talk about sellers asking them to sort of profile, like, I don't want a certain person looking at my house, or I'm not going to sell to a certain person, or with Ring cameras trying to, perhaps that sways their opinion of who they're going to sell to and who they're not. And if that had happened to me and I had a seller who was trying to blanketly discriminate against, someone of another race or nationality or familiar status, I would walk away from that. And that's what I would tell my agents. We have to walk away from that business, because we're not going to, first of all, again, we could lose our license. But just in addition to that, it's not even about losing a license, or it's just about doing the right thing and treating people the way you'd want to be treated. That's what this whole thing is about.
Right. And a story comes to mind for me of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And a while back in real estate, there was a situation that happened to me, and I was involved in an organization, and there were primarily realtors involved. And there was an agent of mine that reached out to someone else, another agent, to have a meeting with them about something in particular.
Okay.
And I'm going to say there's kind of an underlying unspoken respect that we have for one another. That if you're being called by an agent from another broker to have a meeting about something in particular, and it's not a recruiting meeting, like they have not disclosed, hey, I want to come to XYZ Realty, I don't like where I'm at right now, I want to have a meeting with you. Well, that was not disclosed. In fact, it was disclosed that the meeting was about something else. And there was a fellow realtor who used the opportunity after the meeting was over about whatever that topic was that my agent was talking about. That realtor took the opportunity to recruit them. And in no way, shape, or form is that ethical.
No, not at all.
Or did they have integrity while doing that?
No.
And I got to call them out on it, and they did not own up to it. It was as if they couldn't see through the same glasses that I saw through. And it was blatant. My agent came back immediately and said, well, this turned into a recruiting meeting, and I made it very clear what I was going to meet with them about.
Totally different topic.
Totally different.
Yeah.
And I think that, we often can see who people really are when things like that happen. And you and I are in a very hard industry to always walk the line of doing the right thing. Now, I don't think that's hard for you and I, right? But I think it's hard for a lot of realtors or people, colleagues of ours, to do the right thing. And I don't understand that, you know?
No.
And out of respect for my compadres and my associates and the different relationships that I have built over the years, how dare someone blatantly disrespect me?
Right.
And frankly, folks, it happens every day, you know? You kind of just have to pick yourself up and say, well, now I know what that person doesn't have, and that is integrity.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that that's going to happen the next time around with someone else. I think that we all get the choice, and in our business, oftentimes the question is posed to us of, will you lie for me? I don't have to tell this. Oh, let's just sweep this under the rug. What if I pay you on the side? Well, you know, I mean, we could give a million examples and talk for hours about this.
Right.
We just, you and I want to always feel like what we say and what we do are the same thing.
Right. When someone looks back at the reel of my life, I hope that my actions will speak loudly in terms of my ethics and integrity. I think as leaders, one of the things that we have to think about is, and this goes along with having ethics and integrity, is we have to admit fault. We have to admit when we are wrong. You mentioned in your story that this particular leader didn't recognize that they had done something wrong or wasn't willing to own up to it. And you know, part of being a great leader is just admitting that either you don't know something, which is fine because you're not expected. I think there's this persona that we think we have to fill as a leader. Like, we've got to know it all. We've got to come to the table with all the answers, and we can't show, if we say we don't know, that shows weakness, which is, in my opinion, not true.
Right.
The only thing that admits is that I'm human. If I made a mistake, why wouldn't I own up to that? Because the research shows that people are more likely to endear themselves to you if you do show some humility, if you do admit fault, because we all make mistakes. And right now, you mentioned what we're going through in real estate right now. You know, I feel like I have to have this disclaimer right now that when I'm talking to my agents and I'm training my agents on what's going on in the real estate market, that before they leave the room, now just to be clear, I may tell you something different next week, right? Because it's changing so much, and forms are changing, and different things happen that we don't really have any control over, and we're trying to sort of learn as we go. And so I want to admit that I don't have all the answers. None of us do right now. But in any situation, I think it's important for leaders not to feel that they have to have all the answers, that they have to feel like they know it all, because we don't, and no one should have that expectation. If there's that expectation around you, I think you only have yourself to blame. You have set that standard. You have given off that persona that you don't make mistakes, that you are above all, and none of us are. So I think we have to, I think it would go so back to our original point here about politics. If one politician would say, I didn't get that right. I got that wrong, but I'm going to do better. I'm going to fix it next time. I will not lie to you in the future. I didn't lie to you to begin with. I just didn't have my facts straight, or whatever the case may be.
Agreed.
Just admit that you're human, and I can trust you more because of that. And my expectation of most leaders is that they just do their best. I know no one has all the answers, and that's not my expectation of any leader. And I think, again, if you set yourself up that way, then you're just asking for trouble, because we're human, and we're going to make mistakes.
And accountability, that's the word that comes to mind for me, is holding yourself accountable when necessary. And you're right, you and I don't get it right every time. And honestly, learning how to humble yourself with an apology, I can learn a whole lot more from that.
Yes.
Than to try to move forward and act like it didn't happen, and maybe lose respect of someone, whether it be an agent or a friend or whatever, by me not just being able to be accountable for my actions. And this is also something that comes up with our children, right? Your nieces and nephews, if they're going through something and you can see fault, and or you just want to teach them a lesson, we want our children and our young people to grow up with the ability to be humble and to say I'm sorry and to be accountable when they make a mistake or they've screwed up or said something to someone they should never have said, or they lied. They lied and people found out. We need to be better.
Yeah.
We want our young people to grow up to be better, so we have to hold ourselves accountable to be better.
Right. Absolutely. Tanya, I think, have we hit all our points?
I think so.
You've got, I just want to kind of reiterate where we've come on this podcast in terms of ethics and integrity. Number one, don't be afraid to say, I made a mistake. Number two, when push comes to shove and someone is asking you to do something morally or ethically is incorrect, you got to stand up, you got to do the right thing.
Yep. Because you're the one that has to go to bed with yourself at night and look yourself in the mirror the next day. So I think that all of us want to be proud and hold ourselves high.
Right.
Our heads high. So.
Right. And when I think about our pillars that we've talked about, Tanya, this one may be the cornerstone, because if you don't have the right integrity, you don't have ethics, then you don't have customers that want to do business with you.
That's right.
Going back to our customer experience, number one pillar. If you don't have integrity and ethics, then it's hard for you to communicate to your clients, to your cohorts, what needs to be communicated. And then time management. If I think about this, if I'm not ethical and I'm telling lies, how much time does it take me to think about all the lies I've told, and I got to get that straight?
And to keep up with them and to remember them. Yeah.
So, I really think it is the cornerstone of everything else that we will cover moving forward in terms of our pillars of peak performance, because I do not think that you can lead. You can act like you can lead, but you are not an effective leader if you don't have ethics and integrity.
Nope.
If this episode spoke to you, and you have somebody in your life that needs to hear it, I hope that you'll share. We love it when you share our podcast.
Absolutely.
And we want to thank you for listening, because you're taking time for yourself. You're taking time to learn and grow, and that's what we're here for.
Absolutely. Make sure you follow us on social media and share with a friend. Thanks, Gershman Mortgage, for helping us record this, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to the Simply Authentic podcast. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Be sure to listen to us on your favorite podcasting app.